segment today. It's a very important segment. It's Bonnie, if I may, this is the month for suicide prevention. Am I correct there?
Yeah. Yes.
Would you do me the honor of introducing your team, please?
Oh my gosh, I would be so glad to. And Deb, you and I go way back, and I so appreciate you warmly embracing our survivor community and recognizing the needs of the families of America's fallen heroes. It's wonderful to have this partnership with TAPS. You know me, I'm an Air Force veteran myself, and I'm the surviving spouse of a soldier who died along with 7 other soldiers in an Army plane crash. I've got with me today our Vice Presidents of Suicide Postvention and Prevention and of all survivor services. And I'd like them each to take a moment to introduce themselves. So Kim, could you introduce yourself, and then we'll pass along to Audrey.
Sure. Thanks, Deb, for having us in this busy month. This topic is so important right now. I am a clinical social worker, also surviving spouse of Major John Ruwako, who was a Marine Corps pilot who died by suicide in 2005. And so I'm really happy to be here today and have a conversation around suicide and how we can help our spouses.
Thank you, Kim. And Audrey?
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to be here with you. My name is Audrey Bogelsdyke. I'm the Vice President of Survivor Services. Like Bonnie, I'm also a veteran of the Navy. I lost my husband, Jason, who is a seaman in the Navy on March 5th, 1997. And that's what brought me to TAPS. He was lost at sea, and TAPS was my support network at that time. So I come to it from a survivor standpoint, and I'm just thrilled to be here to support this conversation today.
I have several questions here, but as Bonnie knows, this is not rehearsed on purpose. We like everything organic. We like everything to be very, very authentic and genuine and real in real time. So I'm going to skip some of the questions here and go right to you, Kim. A very difficult question for me to ask, and I think you know this, but is there any kind of prevention? I know you talk about postvention.
Yeah.
To spouses struggling with this situation, Kim, I can't even find the words. So right. I'm asking you to help me here.
Yeah. So, I mean, suicide is very complicated. It's really multi-factored, and it usually happens on a perfect storm day when a lot of things come together. And a service, especially in service members, they very often feel like everyone would be better off without them, that the problem is them, that the only way to solve the problem is to end their lives, and they can't really see any way out. So for spouses, it's really, really critical that we pay attention to mental health and get support and have conversations around mental health way, way, way ahead of the time, before our loved one is in a space where they're feeling like they're a burden to others and there's no way to solve their problem. And as a spouse, there's so many lessons learned on the look back about the times over our lives where he was struggling, and I was a cheerleader. You know, us as spouses are taught to push through, to be cheerleaders, to be supportive, to help our spouse be resilient. But if there's mental health challenges or illnesses or injuries, whether they're related to training or combat or childhood, sometimes they need care the same way that medical issues need care. And so what I would say to spouses is trust your gut. When your spouse is struggling, have a conversation about mental health, be real honest about what the struggles are, and connect with the kind of care you need to prevent getting to that perfect storm day where you may lose your loved one to suicide.
Kim, thank you so much. Am I right, Bonnie, am I reading this number correctly? TAPS has provided support to more than 16,000 survivors of military suicide loss?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just got goosebumps everywhere, and not in a good way. That is a large number. So Kim, coming back to you, what did TAPS do for you?
Gosh, everything. I mean, when this first happened to me, it was overwhelming, and I didn't know where to start. And I especially was concerned about my children, who were 2 boys who were 8 and 10 at the time. So a lot of the resources that I went to in 2005 were not supportive of suicide loss. You know, there were combat deaths and accidental deaths and illness deaths gained support, but there wasn't a lot of support for suicide loss. So I was lucky enough to find a brochure late one night, tucked in my casualty officer paperwork that said TAPS on it. And someone had taken a Sharpie and written on it, call them, they'll help you. And it was really like a divine intervention, right? Because I was desperate at that time. And so I called the number, the 800 number that we have 24/7, thinking that I could leave a message because it was like midnight. And Bonnie answered the phone. So I started to tell her, really what was happening with me. And she said, come, we can help you. Of course, you're welcome. We got you, And so I started with TAPS like just a year and a half, 2 years after my husband's death. And that was the first time I really was able to find some hope that I could survive this and start to connect with other loss survivors that have been through similar challenges, and really discover a lot about how suicide loss is very different from other losses.
Very, yes.
There's things that needed to be addressed before they could really dive into their grief and connect with other loss survivors. So Bonnie was great enough to allow me to build a program specifically for suicide loss survivors. And now we have a best practice model, and we have over 16,000 suicide loss survivors. It's our biggest incoming cause of death at TAPS. We're getting about 7 new loss survivors to suicide every single day. So I'm so glad that we have the support for them.
Bonnie, on top of everything else that you've started, and I hope that this will be a monthly thing between us, please. I hope that we'll continue what we're doing today once a month, please. When Kim said that it was a military loss suicide, was there any other organization out there, including, and I'm not picking on DOD, they're extended family to me, but was there anything out there for Kim's type of loss, for her children and her?
Well, that's the wonderful thing about TAPS, is that we are that perfect complement to what the government offers. The government does a magnificent job of rendering final honors, of providing that final resting place and the headstone, and also of administering the government benefits for all eligible beneficiaries. But really, what the government shouldn't be doing and doesn't do is what TAPS does. And that's to provide that peer-based, ongoing emotional support, the connections to additional resources outside what the government can offer, that casework assistance, the connections to grief support that is appropriate to the type of loss in the relationship there in the local community, and so many other services that we do all day, every day, 24/7 with our National Military Survivor Helpline, that really build a family, build a community of all those grieving a military loss. And now that we have so many that have had losses that are specific to the circumstance, such as suicide or illness or accident or combat, and then by relationship, whether that is our sibling group, our men's program, our women's empowerment. There's so many ways for this wonderful family of those who have served in defense of freedom and sacrificed their loved ones can come together and find that community. It's that soft landing.
Yes. Before I get to a question for Audrey, TAPS has done something that no other nonprofit has done, and I believe I can say that with certainty because I've been in this 16 years. You've been in this a lot longer than I have. It is that perfect partnership of what DOD doesn't do. Again, that's not cutting DOD. They can't do everything, nor should they. Here comes a nonprofit organization, and you guys just don't talk the talk. You have all walked that journey walk. I mean, I always have a little bit of hard time talking to TAPS because my emotions are right here in my throat, but I'm going to power through because it's so important. You have managed to create a nonprofit environment that assists DOD in one of the most tender, one of the most hard to talk about, one of the most amazing recovery, if I'm allowed to use that word, recovery mechanisms I know out there for military families who have lost, and in particular, suicide. We don't talk about, women, they did a study. Women don't talk about three things: themselves, money, and suicide. I've read that more and more. Audrey, what are some actions a survivor can take to help cope with the loss of a military loved one during this pandemic? Now, you've got a pandemic and now you've got a suicide, Audrey. How do you cope? How do you begin to cope?
You know, and I think that Kim and Bonnie have both alluded to this. The community that we have created is so important. Plugging in to a network of people who truly can understand the challenges that you're going through is really key. To do it early. To surround yourself with the type of support, people who can answer those questions, who are not afraid to sit in that really difficult moment with you. And I think Kim alluded to this earlier. That's something that she and I share, that when we first picked up that phone and called TAPS after getting that information from our casualty officer, that's what we were met with. We were met with a person who understood our loss, who didn't have to tell us that she understood. We just knew through warm conversation that she got where we were coming from because she had been there. She had credibility and to speak into our situation. This is a difficult time. Even on our best day, when we've had a loss, it's difficult. Now, on top of the loss that you're coping with, people are also dealing with isolation, which is a huge issue right now. It's contributing to mental health concerns. People need people more than ever now when they are more isolated than we have ever been in our recent memory. So
Audrey,
I think
I'm sorry, but that leads to another question, and it's so important. How do you know, Audrey, when a person is grieving correctly? Is there a correct way to grieve during this pandemic?
There's really not one right way. I mean, there are all sorts of workbooks out there, self-help books on grief and what that looks like. But the reality is, with the personal experiences that we bring with us, the individual relationship that we have with the person who has lost, our own personalities, our own networks and coping tools that we've leaned into throughout our lifetime, there really is not one right way. And I think that it starts with having compassion on ourselves, that we don't put a tremendous amount of pressure on ourselves to somehow do it right. Because there's not that one right way. But I think that's why it's really important to surround ourselves with a support network of people who don't pressure us inappropriately to make certain decisions they think we should make. I think that we need to be true to ourselves and lean into people who have been there and done that.
Audrey, that's a nugget. When I hear, and I mean, I've heard so many, but that's a nugget because I have a tendency, I know this is hard to believe, honey, to be kind of controlling of my environment and the environment of others. And I could see myself, Audrey, pressuring somebody to get better only because of what I'm feeling. I kind of forget what they're feeling. So that brings me to my next question. If I had a loved one commit suicide, I would want to talk to Kim. I would want to talk to, I would want to go to TAPS because you know what I'm going through. It's not just words. It's just not things you've seen happen that help me recover. So that would lead me to the next most tender. Kim and Bonnie and Audrey are children. Children especially are a very vulnerable population right now. There are numerous studies out there about the impact that the pandemic is going to have on their mental health. How can a survivor or anyone support their child who is experiencing grief this time? And it's a double question, signs. Actually, another question, what are the signs in kids?
Kim, could
I'll
you
let anyone.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is a critical time. The first thing is around messaging around suicide. How we talk about suicide is really important. And what most people don't know in the civilian world, or truly happens to them, that for survivors, the word commit has a lot of connotation. It suggests that it's something that is a rational act that is illegal or sinful. And for survivors, very often they find out or they come to understand that their loved one was very sick and maybe was not thinking clearly or able to really rationalize that act. So when at TAPS, we use the term died by suicide because that's a lot more comfortable for survivors. And with children, you know, for my own children, I realized, even though I had a master's in social work and I had studied family systems and children, what I didn't realize was how different children are, and each child can grieve very differently. So it's really important to meet each child where they're at, to ask a lot of questions about what they're feeling, to give them permission to express their feelings, whatever they are, helping guide them into a healthy way of expressing those feelings, whether that be talk therapy or play therapy or just movement and activity, or whether that's crying or whether that's being held. Each child may be different, and it's important for parents to kind of get to know their child and what they need with grief, and also to call in professional help if they need it. Now,
Yes.
you know, children can, when they're at risk for suicide, can also look very different from adults. It may look more like agitation or tantrums or oversleeping or just unusual behavior. So the key is to really pay attention to your child's routines and how they're coping and how they're really navigating those basic things of life: school, sleeping, eating, taking care of themselves. And really, if it's starting to change, to start really asking clearly and directly about what they're thinking and feeling, and helping them navigate those emotions.
Thank you, Kim, because you had anticipated that question of what are the signs that might be different in a child than an adult. But then that leads to my next question: what resources are available to military families who are concerned that their service member or child might be at risk for suicide?
Yeah. So there are tons of resources, and every family will maybe have a different comfort level or different amount of connection with resources, right? So there's local resources and there are national resources. There's lots of, and so some people would be more comfortable with faith communities, some people would be more comfortable with therapists, some people would like to call the crisis line. So there's always the National Crisis Line who can give you feedback about local resources. For active duty, there's Military One Source who has lists. There's Cohen Veterans Networks who does free counseling for family members. There's lots and lots of resources. They can go to their chaplain, but it's really important to, when you are concerned about suicide, if a child is saying, I want to die, or I want to hurt myself, or I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself, get some professional help. Start with who you're comfortable with, and then make sure you talk about it openly and get them the care they need. Don't just ignore it because as a attention seeking. Really pay attention to it. Get some professional care to guide you.
Thank you, Kim. Bonnie, this just as Kim was talking, I got this vision, and I'm going to say it live. If a corporation wanted this kind of information, would TAPS go in there and talk about this information to a corporation? Because I have a feeling I was just kind of being, okay, how can a corporation get these resources when they have military inside their corporation? So you see what I'm doing, Bonnie? We're going to have to be doing this maybe twice a month now for corporations. Okay, I've got military here. This spouse, her husband committed suicide. How do we help her as an employer?
Right. And Kim, could you just talk about some of the presentations that you've made to different organizations? And
I mean, this is a common request for us, and we're happy to do it. We've worked with CACI, we've worked with the VA, we've worked with the DOD, we've done, like Cohen Veterans Network, we work with the New York City Police Department, with the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We partner with AFSP and AAS and other national organizations to do trainings at their conferences. And so we do this kind of thing all the time to because it's really part of our healing too, because for survivors, we've learned a lot about suicide. And so the combination of having some professional training with personal experience gives us some insight that might be different than a regular training. So we're able to use that really to help organizations and individuals and groups better understand suicide and therefore prevent it.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to go back to something that surprised me the last time, and I'm embarrassed to say I was surprised by this. Bonnie, who qualifies for these services?
Oh, wonderful, Deb. Thank you for asking that, because it's absolutely foundational to everything we do. And TAPS is there for all those grieving the death of a military affiliated loved one. So that is everybody. You know, Deb, what we talked about is that grief it's not a mental illness. It's not a physical injury. It's not something that you take a pill for, you put a splint on. We only grieve because we love. So the relationship there is for all those grieving the loss of a loved one. And we are a family of those who have that broken heart. And that can include certainly the immediate family members, but also friends, significant others, classmates, battle buddies, all those whose heart is broken by the death of a loved one whose life included selfless service to this country. You know, Deb, we're all about the fact that our loved ones served, and not just about the fact that they died. So we really honor the birthdays of our loved ones just as much as we remember and wrap comfort around the anniversary of the death date, because it is that life that we honor and remember, regardless of how the death occurred.
So, Bonnie, it's not just grieving, it's celebrating the life they had before they died. Kim, I need to come back to you just for a moment. Did I hear you correctly? Because I'm at that age with hearing. Is it, and I apologize, is it a death by suicide, you said, or?
Well, died by suicide.
I'm sorry?
Yep. We say died by suicide.
Died by suicide. See, there's, Bonnie, these questions are so hard to ask someone.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's died by suicide.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that is the correct term. Talk to me about postvention.
Yeah.
Talk to me about postvention.
Yeah, so postvention is a term that was created many years ago by Dr. Schneidman. It is an intervention that decreases risk and promotes healing after a suicide loss. We know that all those exposed to suicide are at increased risk for mental health disorders, addiction, reclusiveness, and additional suicides in their family. So, and we also know from research that 135 people are exposed to each suicide. So it's incredibly important that postvention is part of an overall comprehensive strategy to prevent additional suicides. So yeah.
One suicide, Kim, pardon me, you know me, Bonnie, I'm all about numbers. One suicide, 135 people per suicide can be affected.
Yes, yes. And so they're exposed to that one suicide. And we know when people are exposed to suicide, it can increase their own risk and their own mental health challenges. So postvention is an intervention that comes in and stabilizes and decreases risk. And so TAPS has worked really hard to build a best practice postvention model that really can provide a roadmap, not only for survivors to follow, but also for those who are supporting them, whether they're clinicians or chaplains or others, to see, okay, how do I help this person? This postvention model will really help them stabilize the issues around suicide that happened in the beginning, mental health issues, trauma, because if you like numbers, one of the things we know from the Department of Defense suicide event report is that 76% of suicides in the military either happen in the family home, the barracks, or the workplace. So think about the amount of trauma that is connected to each suicide. When you think about the peers that are exposed to that, their colleagues, their family. So in our model, we address trauma and connecting with care, look for suicide risk, connect with care, and then also help them with suicide-specific issues. How do you help your children, all those things.
Here's one more nugget. You said 3 places that a military-affiliated person will commit suicide. The home.
Yep, the barracks and their workplace. So,
Workplace.
yeah, so
I
76,
had no idea.
about 76% happen in those three places. So if you think about that, who is witnessing that death or finding the body of their loved one or friend or colleague? So there's a lot of trauma that's really related to that death that very often goes unnoticed, untreated, and can come up and add risk for people later on.
If I could, I would like to give Audrey, Bonnie, and you, Kim, 1 minute, or take as long as you'd like. This is a very important issue. If I want to give you the floor to reach out to those who have either been affected by it, they're the 135 that might have been affected by it, or perhaps someone that is contemplating suicide, including military spouses, and caregivers. Maybe we could address that for a moment too. Now I would like to give you this time to make that reach. And we'll start with you, Audrey.
You know, this is such an important topic. I want to exercise a little bit of transparency as well. You know, when we experience our losses, even if that loss was not a loss of suicide, we are all struggling with that journey. I myself struggled with thoughts of suicide and made an attempt on my life after my husband died, several months after he died. What made the difference for me was people who were recognizing that something was going on with me. They saw the warning signs in me, and they were willing to come forward and ask the question. My senior chief asking the question is what saved my life. You know, what are you thinking about? Are you talking about taking your life? Had he not asked that question, I might not be here. And so I am an enormous advocate for being comfortable to simply make the ask, making the ask, and then knowing what to do when a person says, yes, I'm having those thoughts, knowing where you can go to get support. And there are so many resources available, TAPS, AAS, AFSP, places you can go to get that support. So I absolutely know that the work that we are doing is saving lives because we're not afraid to go into those dark places and have those conversations. And we've armed ourselves as an organization and across our staff and are passionate about arming others with the tools that they need to be able to uncover that risk, to have those conversations, to meet people where they are, no matter who it is that comes to TAPS. We are looking at the totality of what they're bringing with them, having conversations that are sometimes really painful, very complicated, a lot of trauma, as Kim referenced. But we're looking at the individual to see where they are in that moment and what is going to be the most crucial thing for them in that moment to help stabilize them, to prepare them for whatever their next day is going to be. And we do that assessment each and every time we connect with a person.
And Audrey, I'll tell you this. When people see this, I mean, the nugget that I take away here, well, there's so many, you aren't afraid to talk about that dark place. That dark place is no longer dark. You have brought it to the light, Audrey. And here's a virtual hug. Here is a virtual hug from my heart to yours. I can't even imagine the courage that just took. And I love you for it.
Well, you're so welcome. And I think the work that Kim does and that Bonnie does, that all of us do within TAPS, it really is shining a light onto a topic that is very, very difficult to wrap your brain around.
Yes.
But it's nonetheless, we have to be willing to have those difficult conversations.
Thank you, Audrey. Kim?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Audrey. I mean, it's so important to have the conversation. So many times I hear from families, I wish we would have talked about that. I wish I would have asked about that. I wish I would have known that it was okay to go there, to have that conversation. So start with asking directly and clearly about suicide, you know, and educating yourself about what to look for. And for those who are suffering and thinking about suicide, what I want them to know is they're not alone. And you can get help and get better. The state of mind that they're in right now doesn't have to be a forever state, Because when people die by suicide, they're thinking that place that they're in is what it's always going to be. And I know many people who've gotten help, gotten better, kept their careers, and live very fulfilling lives. And so I would say to tell somebody, talk to somebody, reach out to your friends. Chances are they've been there and they will support you and get you help.
Thank you, Kim. Bonnie?
Gosh, I'm so proud to have colleagues like Audrey and Kim who have done extraordinary work based on their personal journey. The only thing that I would add is what we say to every survivor who comes to TAPS is that you are not alone. You have found your community. You have found a safe place where there is no judgment. There is only love and acceptance and care and comfort, that we will find the resources. We will get the answers. We will do whatever it takes to meet their needs when and where they need us to do that for them. That this is a family. And it is a family of all of us who are bound together by that love that we received from those we've lost, and now the love of this TAPS family. So the gift that we can give is to normalize, to validate the experiences from, as Audrey said, that peer perspective, that very genuine, authentic, raw self, and to also have the training that we need. Kim has ensured that all of our helpline, our survivor care team have the applied suicide intervention skills training, the assist training, that they are staff who come to us as peer professionals. So they are survivors themselves with advanced degrees in counseling and psychology and social work. So they're connecting heart to heart as a peer, but they're also listening with a trained ear and providing the comfort and the resources. So it's such an honor to be here, Deb, and I'm so
this
proud
is
of the team that
just
we have.
one of many. I mean, if it's okay with you, one organization to another, I'm hoping this will be a monthly thing. And we've just put taps.org/suicide as a resource, but I'll make sure that they get the phone numbers, Bonnie, they get the names, and they get the bios. At this time, I want to thank you for talking about a subject that is so uncomfortable to a lot of people. I'm sitting here with my hands clenched because I'm so afraid to offend, or I'm so afraid to take somebody into an emotional part of their life. So I think the next conversation is how to have the conversation.
Yeah.
How to help people talk about it. That'll be our next time. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. And I look forward to speaking with you next month.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Deb.